If you are here, if you wouldn't mind letting me know in the chat, I'll mark you off on the attendance. So first of all, there is a really good video. I used to actually have this as my own lesson, just on a description of the alternation of generations in plants, which we've sort of on and off mentioned before, but haven't talked about it in any great detail. But then I watched this video and I was like, this is better. It's got a lot of good little animations and stuff that I didn't have in my lesson, and I found it easier to understand from watching this. So I'm going to switch it in. So this basically just goes through the basics of plant reproduction, and talks a little bit about the differences between angiosperms and gymnosperms, which they also mentioned in the video in the documentary. They talked about why angiosperms basically have dominated over gymnosperms, and the pollinators are a big part of it. So they basically co-op a bunch of other organisms into doing the reproduction part for them. They get insects to transport their sex cells, their gametes, between plants. And the other part of it is that it's a great seed distribution mechanism. So if you're a gymnosperm, a conifer, which is basically just like a tree with needles, your distribution strategy is just to throw your seeds down at your feet. Some of them make fairly light little seed pouches that can maybe get blown a tiny bit by the wind, but to be perfectly honest, they don't usually go too far. So you can imagine that in terms of like a strategy for spreading out your offspring, it's not great. Conifers don't do a great job. They kind of scatter them around their feet, and then when that generation grows up, it'll scatter its seeds around at its feet, and on and on. They do produce pine cones, which sometimes get transported around by animals, but it's pretty hit or miss. Whereas fruit plants, which are flowering plants, produce fruits, and not all of them produce like big juicy fruits like apples and stuff, but they all have some type of fruit. It's called a fruit, basically a seed pod. A lot of flowering plants have animals carry those seed pods or eat the seeds. And they are often protected from the stomach acid of that particular animal, and they pass right through. And that's the coating on the seeds, so they don't have naked seeds like gymnosperms do. They have seeds with a coating around the outside. And those seeds can get distributed to a new location by that animal that eats them. Often set down on the ground in a pile of wet nutrition for the baby plant. It's basically just like a perfect planting procedure, is to just drop it in some wet poo, basically. I mean, like that's if you're a plant seed, like you pretty much can't get any better situation than that. Doesn't sound great to us, but if as a plant, that's like pretty much as good as it gets. So anyway, angiosperms have a number of advantages. That's one of the reasons why they are the dominant form of plant on Earth. They just simply outcompeted all of the gymnosperms, which used to cover the entire surface of the Earth. Again, they mentioned that in the documentary, that the Earth was just covered in gymnosperms at one point. But now there's been a reversal of fortune for gymnosperms. So anyway, what I'm going to get you to do is to start off by reading the chapter, this is after the video here, on asexual reproduction in your notes. So we used to do it as a note together, but instead of having you fill in the blanks, I gave you basically the filled in version of the note. I altered it a little bit, but it's at the end here. I'll zip down to it. So it's right here. It's sort of like a chapter summary from the textbook. Save you some time instead of reading the entire textbook chapter. Now, of course, you're welcome to read the textbook chapter. It's chapter 13.2 if you're interested. But this is really all the stuff that you need to know. Okay, so it talks a little bit about some structures that are involved in asexual reproduction. What are the benefits of asexual reproduction? Because lots of plants also use asexual reproduction, so there are some benefits. And there are some negatives to it as well, some costs to the plant. And what are those? And we've talked in general about what are some of the costs of asexual reproduction in any organism, not necessarily just plants, and the same applies to plants. You lose variation, you're basically making clones of yourself, and so that obviously has a negative impact. Anyway, so it's all mentioned here. In the second part of this, what I'm going to get you to do is your own research on the process of grafting. because this is a surprisingly common farming practice, something that I don't think most people are aware of. But when you eat an apple, what you're actually eating is a clone. Let's say that you're eating a Red Delicious or a Macintosh. Let's pick one that's like a popular brand of apple that people know. Most people don't realize that they're eating a clone. A Macintosh apple, every Macintosh apple is genetically identical to every other Macintosh apple. They are, in fact, grafts. So they are basically sticks taken from a single tree that have been grafted onto a new stem, and then propagated. And so then you can graft off that stem, and you can graft off that stem and propagate it out. But every single Macintosh is a clone. The upper part of the tree is a clone. And there's great reasons for this. I mean, it's intentional, because every time you eat a Macintosh apple, it tastes exactly the same, and that's because you're eating a clone of that apple. If you allowed the apple trees to like sort of cross pollinate and by themselves, and by the way, you still have to pollinate them or you don't get apples. But the seeds I don't believe are even fertile from the Macintosh. I could be wrong about that. But you don't plant the Macintosh seeds. That's not how you get new Macintosh apple trees. You only do them by grafting. And again, it keeps the crop consistent. Every Macintosh is exactly the same. If there was cross-pollination happening, every new generation of Macintosh tree would be slightly different. They'd be variations within the population. So some would be a little sweeter, some would be a little less sweet, some would have bigger apples, some would have smaller apples. And farmers don't want that, and consumers don't want that. So consumers demand that everything be exactly the same. That's what people want when they go to the supermarket. They want a product. They don't want like a natural... they don't want something that is just like arisen from nature. They want a product. So that's what farmers produce. So, and there's obviously some issues with farming in that manner. Again, see the note above here about asexual reproduction. But that is the strategy that's used in farming. And it's not just apples. I mean, we do that with many, many, many types of crops. And so what I'm getting you to do here is just look up how this process is actually done. How do we graft crops and make identical organisms for producing food? So I'd like you to look up the process of grafting. What is it? Describe in a little bit more detailed example, like how it's used in a particular industry. Okay, maybe describe the process of how it's used for pears, or I don't know. Pick a fruit that you like. It's almost every fruit. Just pick something that has a tree associated with it, and then investigate. Okay. So that's like the little question you're going to do at the end of that section. And then there are two questions that go along with it from the textbook, 594, 1 and 5. The second part of today is I'm going to get you to read through this section on sexual reproduction. Now, I'm right now going to go through the process of alternation of generations. And the reason I'm going to do that is because you have to talk about it in your project as well. So, excuse me. You have to talk about it in your project as well. You have to make reference to how your particular organism uses alternation of generations. And it doesn't just apply to flowering plants, it applies to all plants, but they all do a variation of that process. So I'm going to go through that together. But the little reading here goes into a little bit more detail about the structure of a seed, what's inside a seed. It talks about the benefits and the costs of sexual reproduction, because there are some costs to sexual reproduction as well. Okay, so this is the second component. I'm missing something here. Page 16. Sexual reproduction. Oop. Questions, exit quiz. Did I not? write this down? I forgot to write this down on here. I did forget to write this down. I gotta update that. Whoops. I forgot to write this sexual reproduction part down at all. That's my bad. I gotta add that in there. So you read through this little section on sexual reproduction. The bottom part here where it says watch this crash course video on and note the differences. Oh, I forgot to include that video too. Jeez. Note the different sexual reproduction strategies of different types of plants. I forgot to put that on the. Sorry, my bad. I must have missed this somehow, or I forgot to save it after I added it. Sorry, I have to update the bottom of it here. So you read through this there, and then there's a little video that goes along with it called the plants and the bees, and it goes through comparing reproductive strategies between pteridophytes, bryophytes. In very basic, and it talks a little bit about the idea of a fruit. What is a fruit, and what makes something a fruit? That part's important because there's a question on the quiz about that, and I didn't include that. I'm actually shocked that I must have forgot to save it after I put that in the. Sorry about that. I'm gonna update this. So maybe when you're like partially through this content, make sure that you reload this page. I must have. It should be before the exit quiz here. It should be the read the section on sexual reproduction and then watch this video on what makes something a fruit. It should be right in between 4 and 5 here. I had that in there at one point, but I must have forgot to press save. And then there's a little exit quiz. So anyway, that'll take you probably most of the first block. There's a fair amount of stuff in there. And then the second block is all for you to work on your importance of plants presentation. Hopefully you've got a start on it. So just something to keep in mind as we go through this week. This is the last week of class. I know it's so weird how these courses work, but we are actually done the course at the end of the week. Friday of this week is the last day of your course, this course. So how that works, and so this is going to be problematic for some students. I know that because I've had chats about extensions for many students on every assignment so far. Or I should say on many assignments. Some students have required an extension on every assignment, which is excessive in my opinion, but that's you are where you are. But the problem here is that the course is over on Friday. So for the next unit, which we're going to start tomorrow, the evolution unit, please be aware that there is a hard cap on when that stuff is due. It is due on Friday at midnight. Now, because it's such a tight timeline, the major project for evolution, the presentation, is optional. You do not have to do the presentation for the evolution unit. So if you don't want to do it, you can opt in, opt out. I guess you could say it's bonus in a way, although yes, your mark can go down if you phone it in. But if you feel like you're not doing particularly well and you're trying to boost your mark, you're welcome to do it. We'll talk about it in more detail tomorrow, but it is a bonus assignment, so you don't have to do it. But there is a hard deadline on Friday at midnight. On Friday at midnight, the Dropbox for the assignment disappears. There is no way to hand it in after Friday at midnight, and there's no extensions on this. And the reason for that is because the course is over. The course is over, guys. I have to, at that point, scramble to try and get all of your assignments back. I realize, by the way, I'm behind. I'm sure you're aware of that already. I'm still marking stuff from my other course, which is from 2 weeks ago. So I'm doing my best here. I've got many hours of videos to watch. I'm working on it. I'll get updates for you as soon as possible. But anyway, I have to put a hard cap on it somewhere because I have to start preparing your report cards, and I do have to get caught up. So on Friday, there is a hard deadline on Friday at midnight. So I won't be accepting the bonus assignment after that point. There is still a vocabulary list for the evolution assignment, but it's only 20 words instead of 30 words for evolution. So it's shorter, and there is a quiz. but you have to write the quiz on the last day of the course on the Friday. So sometimes I say, well, take some extra time, take a day. I mean, many people do that, and that's totally fine, by the way. But it's not possible here. At the latest, the quiz has got to be completed by the Saturday at midnight, okay, which is one day after Friday. All right. So I know this is going to be a tough task for some people. It's going to be a big ask for some people. I have people that are still emailing me saying, I got to finish this from the animal systems unit. Guys, we are coming to the end of this course, okay? You really have to buckle down now, and you have to get this stuff done and hand it in. It's in your mind. I know that you've been saying, well, I still have this time. You don't. The time is up, okay? It needs to come in immediately. If you owe me anything from the animal systems unit, that has to come to me today. It needs to be done now. I'm sorry to say, but imagine now that you don't complete that today. That means within 4 days, between now and Friday, you're going to complete every assignment from the plants unit and every assignment from the evolution unit, not including the bonus assignment. I mean, don't set expectations for yourself that are way beyond what I've ever seen a student do before, okay? Even in desperation. And I tried to stay on top of you guys through the quad and have this discussion multiple times, but now we're here. Now we're at that spot, and a number of students are in a boat where they're like, uh-oh, I did the thing that I wasn't supposed to do, and I put these things off a bunch of days. I didn't discuss extensions and keep them within reasonable timelines, and now I'm in trouble. I don't know what to tell you guys. I'm sorry. The unit is going to end at the end of the week. So if you are in a boat where you're like, uh-oh, I'm really going to scramble to get this done, you should contact me. Let's establish a timeline together. Now, if we together, collectively, you and I, establish an extended timeline that goes beyond this Friday. And by the way, I will not be extending this to everybody. So, because I can't. I won't get my report cards done in time. But if you are in that boat and you need an extension, we need to work together to create a schedule for you to complete the course. Please contact me. But if you're going to go silent on me, if you're going to go silent running, and we haven't worked together to establish that timeline, guys, I am not extending your deadline past Friday. I'm cutting you off, okay? Credit, goodbye. I'm sorry to say. I want everybody in here to be successful, but you are sabotaging yourself, and I'm not going to help you with that. So I really, really want everybody to get this credit, and I can't emphasize this enough. If you're not on track for that right now, you must contact me, okay? And then we're going to work something out that you have to stick to in order to get you this credit. But if not, I don't know what to tell you. You're not going to make it. Oh yeah, for sure I can. Oh, hold on a second. Wait, I couldn't find the empty plants unit notes. The empty one. The empty plants unit notes, Bree, are if you go to the very first day of the plants unit, day 15, and then you look at the top of it, it says you will need the new set of course notes right there. And if you click on that, that's the entire package for plants. Or do you mean the completed notes, like with the filled in version of these? I thought I had posted those, but I can double check if I haven't. Sorry, I don't think I saw your post there right away because I gotta get my glasses. Sorry, it's blurry. The empty ones, yeah, the empty ones are up. Yeah, they're if you they're right here. I'm looking at them. So if you go to the very first day of the plants unit, and then it's just below. There's like the stream video. Whoops, it easy. The stream video, and then below that it says Introduction to Plants. You'll need a new set of course notes, and then they're located right there. They're also on the sidebar here, but I think oh yeah, it's in the sidebar as well. It's right there in the sidebar. I don't usually post the empty ones, or at least not intentionally. I think maybe I accidentally post the empty ones. The bar at the top, the 3U course notes thing is meant for the completed notes. It's supposed to be completed copies of each of the notes, not the blank ones. I'm hoping that there's a completed version in there. Plants. Yeah, the completed one's in there. It doesn't go right to the end because the last part is you fill in. There's no note that goes along with the last part. I just saw it though. I feel like I'm missing something here, Bree. Okay, cool. Okay. So anyway, I'm not trying to give people a hard time about this. I just understand that the course is coming to a close. And we've got to work out something between us if you don't feel like you're going to be on track for finishing stuff before Friday. Now, that being said, I do understand that this week is not going to be your powerhouse week where you start putting out productivity at a level unheard of before, or at least probably isn't going to be that. It's almost summer. Well, it's raining today, but it's lovely weather. The end of the quad is always hard because I think for many people they're done with biology. So my strategy here is twofold. One, I think I put the most interesting topic at the end. That's just my personal choice. I love the topic of evolution. I think it's really cool. And the second component of this is I've dialed back the amount of work that we do every day for the last unit. It's not quite as excessive. It's a shorter unit than the other units. And there's a reason why there's only 20 words in the vocab list. There is less vocab. It's a shorter unit. So I've cut a bunch of stuff out of the evolution unit and tried to keep it to just the basics. This is the basic stuff that you need to know to have a good, solid, functional understanding of how evolution works. And for what you're going to need to carry forward if you take like a first-year evolution course in university. Like this is what you need to know for that course. So this is like the quick and dirty version of evolution, just like the core essential things that you would need to understand. So anyway, that's what I've done here. I'll go through exactly what's there tomorrow, but if you can already like look through. There are very few notes. I've tried to keep the notes to a minimum. There's a little bit of reading. But there's a fair amount of sort of shorter videos. There's a lab, like a digital lab. I did a whole video series on day 21 here. That's all on human evolution. Really cool stuff, by the way. I find this fascinating. Hopefully you will as well. But I've tried to keep it to a minimum. Okay, I'm not trying to like really hit you over the head with a huge workload here in the last week of the course. So just as a heads up, I have tried to minimize it a little bit. We'll talk about that more obviously as we get into the unit, but I just wanted to mention that. Please work out a strategy with me to get your assignments in. I am going to start sending emails home now, letting people know what they owe me. Please respond to the emails. We're just not in a good place right now. So for some people are in a great position. Some people are done everything and they're ready to go. Amazing. So again, I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade. I know a lot of people have worked very hard in this course and it shows. So, okay, I'm going to stop wasting time. Let me quickly review here what my issue was with my note on translocation because I did make a mistake. So one thing I quickly want to mention. Oh, is this going to work? I'm going to have to restart this. So I previously mentioned in my translocation note, hopefully this looks relatively familiar, this idea that you've got your sieve tube elements. Those are the phloem cells. They have an attached companion cell, and then there are other parenchymal cells or leaf cells or whatever associated with those where you're either going to be producing sugar or you're going to be storing sugar, which is either a source or a sink. And I mentioned that these phloem cells have in between them essentially pump proteins that are forcing sugar to go in a particular direction. Pump down, pump up, whatever the direction is of flow that is required by the plant. Not true, as I found out. So my main issue here is actually with the definition of what a cell is, because this is this is a little bit confusing. So phloem cells, and I did mention previously this idea that xylem cells, so I have the same sort of diagram down here, except I drew this diagram. Xylem cells, which are next door, are dead. There is no cytoplasm. There is no there is no cellular machinery. There is no cell membrane. Xylem is dead. Okay? But if you look through the literature and you look at phloem cells, they call them alive. They say that these cells are alive, these phloem cells. Cool. That's nice. My assumption then, when you say that something is alive, and so this is obviously problematic, is that it has a cell membrane going around it. And that's not correct. So they do have some cell membrane, phloem cells, but it is not continuous. It doesn't go all the way around the cell. So what they actually have is only a partial cell membrane. And where the two sieve tube elements, remember phloem cells are called sieve tube elements, where the sieve tube elements intersect with each other, so that's where one phloem cell intersects with a neighboring phloem cell, they actually don't have any cell membrane there. This is actually, it's open on the ends of the cells. And what I previously had thought were pump proteins here that were in the cell membranes that were allowing materials to be pumped are actually just open channels. So what that means is that each sieve tube element is actually just open to the next sieve tube element. They are open from one to the next. There is like an active open space between the two of them. And this is, in my opinion, a little problematic in terms of the definition of a cell and what is alive, because how do I differentiate between one cell and the next cell if there's no barrier between them? I don't have an answer to that, and I did some digging and I actually can't find anything to explain where one ends and the next one begins. So whatever, that's not important, and I guess it's above my pay grade with regards to my botany understanding, which is fine. There's lots of stuff in science like that that's above my current level of understanding, and that's I'm not offended by that. But I will say that there is some cell membrane in here, but it's not continuous. It doesn't go around the entire cell. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means that there's no pumping going on in between these. You can't pump something without pumps, basically. There's no pumps. So the only thing that is actually moving sugar through the sieve tube elements is just Turgor pressure, And I mentioned the Turgor pressure part in the note, but my problem is in the note, I said that Turgor pressure assists with the pumping of sugars, when in reality, it is the only force that is driving the movement of sugars. So how does the Turgor pressure work? I'm going to do a real quick review here and mention how this works. So there are pumps involved. Translocation, moving sugar around, is an active process. There is pumping, but the pumping is actually happening between the source, not between the source, between the companion cell. So this purple guy right here is a companion cell, and the sieve tube element. So the companion cell, or the sieve tube element, is pumping sugar in from the source. Okay. Whoops. So that is happening. There is pumping happening, and that's the active process. At the source, the companion cell and the sieve tube element are working together to pump sugar into the sieve tube element. And that takes energy. So that's why this is unlike what's happening in the xylem with the water, which is just flowing due to the three mechanisms we mentioned in the lesson. This is not a passive process. You have to pump sugar into it in order for this to work. So what happens is that you pump a bunch of sugar in here, and then it all has to do with its interaction with the xylem that's next door. So here we have a high sugar concentration, and over on the other side, where the water is in the xylem, we have a very low sugar concentration. So nature does not like an imbalance like this. This is an entropy issue, if you've talked about entropy in chemistry. But we have also talked about it, the idea that things always flow from high to low concentration. So your first thought might be, well, the sugar probably wants to just flow here into the xylem. That's true. It does want to. But the problem is it can't, because this membrane right here is actually not permeable to sugar. Sugar can't go through it. So that's not an option. But that's not the only way to equalize the concentrations here. The other way to equalize it is if water comes in the opposite direction. So if water comes from the xylem over into the phloem, that would also help to equalize the concentration difference between these two sides. Okay? And so that is what happens because it is permeable to water. Water can go in this direction. So water flows then into the sieve tube element, which inflates it. It fills it up with water, kind of like filling up a balloon with water. So when you pump up a balloon full of water, well, that creates pressure inside. It actually pressurizes the tube. That type of pressure is called Turgor pressure. I mentioned this in the note. Again, I mentioned it as sort of like something that assists translocation, but this is the main mechanism that actually causes translocation to occur. So we've got high pressure in here, high Turgor pressure. Now keep in mind that there is sugar down here as well at the sink in the phloem, but it's not very much because you're always pumping sugar out of the sieve tube element at the bottom. You're pumping it out and sending it into your sink cell. So because you're pumping it out, the concentration of sugar here is very low, which means that the amount of water, that's coming over here from the xylem is a tiny, tiny little bit of water. Only a little bit of water is coming here. And so the pressure in this sieve tube element is low. We have low Turgor pressure here. So we've got low pressure here, and we've got high pressure here. Well, again, that's the principle of diffusion, right? Things are going to move from high pressure to low pressure, high concentration to low concentration. Happens in every context in physics, chemistry, biology. So high pressure will move then to low pressure, and we're going to get a flow of sugar just going through the gaps in between these cells down to the sink through the sieve tube elements. So that's how Turgor pressure actually causes a movement or a flow here. And it is an active process because you need energy to load up the sugars into this sieve tube element. The companion cell and the sieve tube element are actively pumping sugars in. And the opposite is occurring down here. They're actively being pumped out. So okay, hopefully that cleared up any issues here. But I do want to mention again that these cells don't have a continuous cell membrane that goes around, and they're actually open to the neighboring cell. So the sugar is just flowing through them as opposed to them pumping through like a bucket brigade. I think in the note I called it a bucket brigade, the idea that they're handing it from one cell to the next as they go through, which is not correct. But there you go. I found out something new. So and I double checked with several sources actually just to make sure that I had the correct understanding here. So that is how it works. Okay, so before you get started today, I have one more thing I got to mention. Sorry, I'm going on and on here. I want to talk a little bit about alternation of generations. So the basic premise here of alternation of generations is that sometimes a plant is diploid. It has 2 N chromosomes in it, and sometimes a plant is haploid. It has 1 N chromosomes in it. Okay, and I know I mentioned this previously, which is a little bit confusing. Yes, some plants break these rules. They have 4N at some point and blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about that. Okay, for the purpose of this course, remember that we're mostly going to talk about the rules in this course. And then if you really want to get into botany, then you can go get your botany degree, and then you can find out about the 10,000 exceptions to the rules. But we're going to focus on the rules, and then I'm going to leave the exceptions of the rules to a different course. Okay, I mean that almost applies to every single thing you learn this quad. So, but yes, I did mention that sometimes the 2n, 1n, 2n thing doesn't work for plants, but we're just going to talk about the basics. Okay, the basic process, how it normally works. So, when you think of a plant, I would guess that the thing that you're probably thinking about is a mature plant. Okay, so you're thinking about like a, I don't know, maple tree. Okay, there you go, mature plant. All right, and when we say mature, what I mean by that is sexually mature. It is able to produce the organs that allow it to reproduce. Okay, we actually use that definition for animals as well. When we talk about a mature animal, we're talking about capable of reproduction. Okay, it's an adult basically. So this is the mature plant. Now, if you were to go and look in all of the different cells of the mature plant, you would see that they are in fact diploid for most plants. Okay, so you look in all their cells. This is a 2n plant. Every cell has 2n chromosomes. Okay? When we're talking about a mature plant, or a plant where every cell is diploid, this is what's known as a sporophyte. Okay? A sporophyte is a mature plant, or at least a plant that has 2n chromosomes. Okay? So this part of the plant's life cycle is known as the Sporophyte generation. And I'm going to highlight each part of the life cycle here that's Sporophyte generation with a red highlighter. Okay? So mature plant, that's Sporophyte generation. Now, a mature plant, and I'm going to do this for flowering plants. I'm going to talk about this with regards to angiosperms. But remember that the production of gametes, sperm and egg, happens in some form or another for all plants. Pteridophytes, bryophytes, they just look a little bit different. The exact configuration is a little bit different, but the basics are still there. Okay? So here, on this plant is going to form a, plant is going to form a flower. And I'm going to use the example here of a perfect flower, but yes, not all plants have a perfect flower, so these may be separated onto either different plants, or maybe that there's different flowers. One is male, one is female, or they have male flowers and then at a later time in the season have female flowers. But either way, there's going to be male and female components involved here. Okay, so I'm going to use the same sort of structures that you would have seen last time. This would be the female part here, yeah. Stigma, style, and inside here it's going to form an ovule. Okay, and this is going to be a 1n egg. Okay. And then there's also the male version of this, which is that we're going to have pollen grain, which is also 1n. Okay, to be clear, some types of plants are actually going to have two 1N gametes within a single pollen. Some have one 1N gamete and some have two 1Ns, but in either case, there are 1N cells located inside of the pollen. Sometimes there's more than one of them, okay? And in fact, I'm gonna put two in this one, okay? So we've got I'm gonna zoom in even more on this. Let's undo this, and I'm gonna zoom way in on the pollen, and I'm gonna say that there is a 1N over here and a 1N over here. Okay, there's actually two 1N gametes inside the pollen. This is a very common configuration. Okay, so this adult sporophyte has produced two things here which are no longer diploid. Okay, they're haploid. They only have half of the normal complement of DNA. Unlike in animals, in animals we don't think of the sperm and egg as being a different generation, because they basically have to be enclosed within the adult animal or within some type of egg structure in order for them to be maintained and kept alive, and they require parental supervision during this process as well. Whereas the ovule and the pollen are completely independent organisms, and to some extent they actually grow on their own by themselves without the adult plant. So we actually think of these as being a totally separate generation from the adult plant. We have the pollen and the ovule are separate, basically. They're going on their own way and making their own way in the world. Okay, so we consider this to be like a totally separate generation that we call the Sporophyte generation. Oh, sorry. Of course, I'm going to get the terminology wrong here. This is the Gametophyte generation. Now, Gametophyte has the word gamete right in it, which helps because we're talking about two gametes here. But this is the Gametophyte generation. And the key to the Gametophyte generation is that it's every stage that is 1N. Okay, the 1N part is the important part. And so I'm going to highlight everything that's the Gametophyte generation. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. I was looking for those. Thank you, sweetie. Whew, that helps a lot. I'm going to highlight everything that's the Gametophyte generation in blue. But again, if it's 1N, that's the Gametophyte. So here we go. We've got an ovule. That's Gametophyte. And here we've got... Oh, that's not going to highlight through there. And here... maybe if I add a descriptor here, I'm going to call these 1N pollen. Okay, Gametophyte. Then these are going to meet. So hopefully it's not from the same plant, although it is sometimes from the same plant. And when they meet, often you've got this is going to take some doing here. All right. I'm wondering if I can take this and then shrink it. Oh, I can. That's kind of cool. All right, shrink that down. And it's going to land on the stigma here. And it's going to grow a tube down into the plant. This is where it's a little bit different from animals, right? Where the sperm is not going to be like growing a structure on its own. But this is actually growing a structure into the plant. And it's going to send its two 1N nuclei down into the 1N nuclei from the plant. Okay. So this happens, and then at this point, fertilization hasn't occurred yet. So you could consider this, so this is pollination occurring here. But we don't have fertilization yet. Okay, so this is still Gametophyte. Oh, I shouldn't be, I'm mixing up red and blue text. That's a terrible idea. Let's keep the blue text for Or did I do always red text? Oh, I hope I'm not confusing people here. Pollination. But I'm going to use blue highlighter, though, because this is gametophyte. So, and then we actually have fertilization occurring. So fertilization means, if I can zoom in on just this area here, here I've got the ovule, and now the 1N pollen is going to merge together with the other 1N pollen, and it's going to form a 2N nucleus inside. Okay, so we have fertilization occurring here. And that second 1N, remember that there was two 1Ns here in the pollen, can actually intersect with another 1N. So this is going to become the what's the word I'm looking for here? Zygote. There we go. And then the second one does another 2N over here. But this is not going to become a plant. The second part here is actually going to become the endosperm. This is true, by the way, for angiosperms. And so this double fertilization, this second fertilization, is only for gymnosperms and angiosperms, but not for pteridophytes and bryophytes. They don't have this double fertilization. So this extra part over here, so there's pitfalls to showing the angiosperm one here, but that doesn't happen for pteridophytes and bryophytes, as far as I know. So so this right here, the second fertilization is going to form endosperm. And endosperm is basically going to become a food supply for the seed. So if you look on the, it's not in this note, but if you look in the note for sexual reproduction, the one that you're going to read over today, there's a little diagram there of a seed, and you can see where it is. There's like the little gametophyte inside, or sorry, the little sporophyte, which is the zygote. And then there's also like another area in the seed that's like a big juicy part of the seed, and that's the endosperm. So that part is just going to be a food supply for the growing seedling. Okay, so we've had this occur, and because we're now talking about a 2N organism, now we're not a gametophyte anymore. Now we're a sporophyte. So I'm going to switch over to red highlighter here. So because we're talking about, again, this is a zygote and an endosperm. These are both diploid. So this is now part of the Sporophyte generation. Okay, so this is going to form a seed. Okay, so let's say that this was a dicot. Okay, if this is a dicot, we're going to end up with a little two-leaf structure in here, like this. And so you would call this the sporophyte inside. And then there's going to be a region around it, like this part right here. And this is the endosperm. Okay, that's in the seed. This is also Sporophyte generation, again, because it's 2N. I'll try and, actually I should try and label it 2N wherever it's 2N. Okay, and then this is going to emerge. It's going to germinate. There we go. So we've got germination. Germination is just when the seed erupts. Okay, and that's obviously also 2N still. And so it's part of the Sporophyte generation. And then that's going to grow up into the mature plant. Okay, so I've got a blue section up here that is the Gametophyte generation. That's the pollen and the egg before they're fertilized. Okay, and then once they come together, they're going to form a zygote and an endosperm if it's an angiosperm. That's going to be now Sporophyte generation as soon as it's 2N. So only angiosperms and gymnosperms produce endosperms? That is my understanding. Now, hold on. If I'm going to say that, I better double check. Bryophytes. What about pteridophytes? Okay. Actually, that's not a clear answer. Okay. This is okay. All right. Based on a few minutes of doing some reading here, this double fertilization that I just showed you right here is specific to angiosperms. So that's flowering plants. Flowering plants do the double fertilization, or at least a lot of them do, where they produce an endosperm that is diploid, okay, due to 2 fertilizations occurring. Gymnosperms also produce a endosperm, but my understanding from reading here is that it is haploid. So there's not a second fertilization that occurs. There is just a separate nucleus that is also haploid, present in the ovule, that becomes the gymnosperm, and there's no fertilization that's occurring to produce that endosperm. Pteridophytes and bryophytes, which are the other two groups of plants, do not produce an endosperm. There doesn't appear to be any secondary endosperm that's produced. So I'm not sure what's supporting the seeds as they're growing. Perhaps they emerge and immediately begin photosynthesis, but they don't have the same energy storage within the seed as gymnosperms and angiosperms have with the endosperm. Okay, Ivana, hopefully I answered your question there. So this double fertilization thing is only for angiosperms. There is an endosperm in present in gymnosperms, but it's not fertilized. So it is a haploid endosperm. There's still fertilization that occurs. That's for the zygote, but the other part, the endosperm, is not fertilized. Okay. Any other questions about this process here? We're alternating between being a gametophyte, which is pollen or ovule, and then we're switching back. We're fertilizing and going back to a sporophyte. The sporophyte matures, produces gametophytes, which are sperm and pollen and ovule, sperm and egg basically, which are gametophytes. They go out, do their business. Once they merge, they become a sporophyte again within the seed, and then the sporophyte becomes a mature tree, and then this cycle keeps repeating. And that's why, by the way, this is called alternation of generations, because we're having an alternation, a switching between sporophyte, gametophyte, sporophyte, gametophyte. And all plants do this. But the double fertilization thing is exclusive to angiosperms. Okay. Oh, so hopefully that made that clear. That's not necessarily super clear in the video, and people always ask me about this because now in your project, you do have to make reference to your life cycle and talk about the gametophyte and sporophyte generations in your plant video. So maybe hopefully this was helpful in sort of establishing what the difference is between the sporophyte and the gametophyte part for your own plant. And you may have picked a bryophyte or pteridophyte. It's totally up to you. But okay, I'm going to stop talking. I don't want to waste any more of your time. I will update this. I forgot to include the sexual reproduction part, which is supposed to go in between 4 and 5 here. I will add that in right now. Just make sure that you are refreshing your page. Maybe when you're done the first part here, the asexual reproduction part, just refresh your page so that you can see the second part. But basically, it's just you're going to watch one little extra video on what is a fruit and read the sexual reproduction note, which is at the end of the notes package. It's the bottom of the plant's notes package. Okay, guys, I'm going to let you get to work. We are going to convene again at 11:05. I'm going to take attendance, but that time is 100% yours to work on your project. All right, I'll see you in a bit. Please ask questions if you have them.